Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are on a seriously delicious mission. We've all had burgers that are just okay, right? You know, the kind you eat at a backyard barbecue and pretty much immediately forget. But what if you could actually engineer the absolute perfect bite? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're building the ultimate, scientifically and culinarily backed burger straight from the ground up. Whether you're cooking for a massive weekend cookout or just craving a killer Tuesday night treat, we're breaking down the exact anatomy of a flawless burger, leaving absolutely no variable to chance.
So, picture this. It's a beautiful Saturday. You've got friends over, the grill is blazing hot, but the burger you serve is just kind of dense, a little chewy, unremarkable. It's a frustration we have all felt. So, what actually separates that slightly disappointing homemade patty from a $25 mouth-watering steakhouse masterpiece? We are going to answer that today by chronologically following the burger's journey. We'll track every single step, starting from the meticulous selection of the raw beef, right down to that final, safe, and incredibly juicy bite.
All right, let's kick things off with part 1, mastering the meat blend. This is the absolute foundation of our perfect burger. The golden rule here for a classic, juicy burger, you've got to rely on whole muscle cuts with a target lean-to-fat ratio of 80-20. You desperately need that 20% fat to make sure the patty doesn't dry out when it hits the blistering heat. But beyond just the fat content, think of blending beef kind of like, well, orchestrating a massive musical score. You wouldn't want a symphony made entirely of flutes, right? Short rib is your deep double bass. It's intensely marbled and brings this heavy, luscious texture. Chuck is your middle strings, giving you that buttery, dependable backbone. Brisket acts like the high woodwinds, adding a bright, hearty, coarse bite, while sirloin provides a clean, structural percussion that holds the whole thing together. When you thoughtfully blend these distinct cuts, you get a complex symphony of flavor that one single cut of beef simply cannot match.
Now, it turns out ground meat acts a whole lot like bread dough. There's a really complex matrix of proteins in there, and the more that meat gets compressed, handled, and mashed together, the tougher it inevitably gets. That is exactly why prepackaged cryovac beef, which is squeezed incredibly tight just to maximize shipping space, almost always gives you a tough, dense texture. A fresh custom grind from your local butcher, on the other hand, is a totally different ballgame. It's loose, airy, and fluffy, and crucially, it retains these intact little pockets of fat. As the burger cooks, those specific fat pockets gently melt and baste the meat from the inside out. The result? A significantly juicier and vastly more tender bite.
Moving right along to part 2, the science of seasoning. Because listen, a truly great burger is, fundamentally, a salt equation. Here's the thing, kosher salt's real job in the kitchen isn't actually to make your burger taste salty. In fact, if your burger tastes noticeably like salt, something has gone terribly wrong. Instead, salt acts as an amplifier. Its true purpose is pulling the beef's existing natural, savory flavors forward. Imagine tasting a slice of raw tomato without salt and then trying it with salt. It suddenly tastes intensely more like a tomato, right? That is precisely what we're doing to the beef, aligning its natural umami perfectly with the bun and whatever toppings you choose to throw on there.
Okay, here is where the actual physics of seasoning comes into play. If you mix salt directly into the ground meat before you shape the patty, well, it's basically a chemical disaster for your burger. The salt actively dissolves the muscle proteins, causing them to cross-link and bind together super tightly. And the result? You get a bouncy, dense, springy puck that feels and tastes exactly like a dense breakfast sausage. We absolutely want to avoid that entirely. To keep the burger loose, tender, and properly beefy, you have to religiously only season the outside.
So, if you want a totally foolproof, mathematically balanced spice formula to coat the outside of those patties, this is it. Kosher salt is your base, obviously, but then we build deliberate layers. Paprika isn't just for that gorgeous caramelized color. It brings this faint, earthy sweetness. That sweetness perfectly counters the sharp, savory depth of the garlic and onion powder. Then, ground mustard brings a crucial, hidden tang that cuts right through the rich beef fat. Black pepper and coriander give you a bright, zesty bite, and dried oregano offers this really surprising herbal lift that marries beautifully with the char from the grill. Just remember, generously coat the exterior of your patties with this ultimate blend right before they hit the heat.
All right, part 3, shaping the perfect patty. Let's talk about forming that physical foundation.
For that classic, commanding steakhouse burger vibe, you're generally aiming for a 6-ounce patty that sits roughly 3/4 of an inch thick. To achieve that majestic shape without ruining the delicate, fluffy texture we just carefully built, there are 3 golden rules. Rule number 1, keep your hands cold.
Beef fat melts at a really low temperature, so if your hands are warm, that delicate fat starts rendering out right onto your palms before it even reaches the pan. Rule 2, work the meat incredibly loosely, using just enough pressure so it simply holds together. And Rule 3, press a shallow indent right in the center of the patty.
And why that indent? Well, it prevents a super frustrating kitchen phenomenon known as the meatball puff. It's all about the dimple effect. As the burger hits the intense heat, the outside edges cook the fastest. The proteins violently contract, essentially cinching up like a tightening belt. Without that little indent in the middle, those shrinking edges force the raw center straight upward. Suddenly, you've got a swollen, round meatball that completely ruins your bun-to-meat ratio and sends all your toppings sliding right onto the plate. That simple thumbprint basically gives the meat room to expand inward, allowing the patty to lay perfectly, beautifully flat.
Which brings us to part 4, techniques for the cook. We're looking at the smash versus the grill.
The cooking surface you choose, it radically dictates the entire style, texture, and flavor profile of your burger. The smash burger relies on blazing hot, flat metal, like a plancha or a heavy cast iron skillet. By smashing the meat paper thin, you maximize direct contact with the searing metal, creating those irresistible, crispy, intensely caramelized lacy edges. On the flip side, the steakhouse grill method uses a traditional 2-level charcoal or gas fire. Here you use a much thicker patty, and the magic flavor comes from the rendering fat actually dripping down onto the hot coals, vaporizing, and sending a wave of smoky, singed beef fat flavor straight back up into the meat.
Now, if you're going the smash route, here are the absolute secrets to success. Preheat your flat surface until it is literally smoking hot. Next, and this is counterintuitive, do absolutely nothing to oil the pan. Seriously, the meat must aggressively stick to the dry steel. Sticking is exactly how we develop that crucial Maillard crust. You know, that magical chemical reaction between amino acids and reducing sugars that gives aggressively browned food its deeply savory, undeniable flavor. Smash the meat completely flat using a piece of parchment paper so it doesn't stick to your spatula. And when it's finally time to flip, use a heavy, stiff spatula and scrape aggressively into the metal to make sure you don't leave a single bit of that delicious, crispy edge stuck behind.
Okay, finally, part 5, temperature and food safety. Let's make sure this masterpiece is completely safe to eat.
When it comes to temps, ground beef carries entirely different risks than, say, a whole muscle cut like a steak. Think about it. A steak is essentially sterile on the inside. Any bacteria lives purely on the exterior surface, so a quick, incredibly hot sear on the outside makes a steak completely safe to eat rare. But the mechanical grinding process of burger meat changes everything. It takes any of that potential surface bacteria and folds it, mixes it, and pushes it directly into the very center of the patty.
While you can certainly aim for whatever doneness level you prefer, here is a massive pro tip you need to follow every single time you cook. Whatever your target internal temperature is, always pull the burger off the heat 5 to 10 degrees early. Carryover cooking is a very real phenomenon. The immense residual heat trapped inside the meat will actually continue to cook the patty from the inside out, even while it's just resting peacefully on the plate.
Which brings us to the most critical number to remember, 160 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the USDA and FDA certified safe minimum internal temperature for a well-done burger. Hitting this exact number guarantees the absolute prevention of foodborne illness, which is absolutely essential if you're cooking for kids, the elderly, or anyone in a vulnerable group. Hitting 160 degrees just provides total peace of mind at your cookout, letting you focus entirely on the massive flavor and the fun of the gathering instead of worrying about food safety.
We'll wrap up this explainer with an awesome thought from culinary expert J. Kenji Lopez-Alt. Go out there, get your grind on, and don't let anybody else tell you what you should top your burger with. You now have the ultimate, scientifically backed foundation to build the perfect patty from scratch. But the final, most exciting variable? That's you. With the science of the meat, the seasoning, and the heat totally locked down, what will be the signature combination of toppings, sauces, and buns that makes this masterpiece entirely your own?